Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this game's worth your time and bandwidth.
Today's game is Hades 2, the early access May 2024 release. The latest and greatest bisexual game where everyone's hot is back. Is the early access version worth playing now, or should you wait? Let's find out. Hades 2 is finally on early access, and much like the first game, it's already a massive and polished experience. There's more content in this early access build than the entirety of the first game. Did they do enough here, or is this just more Hades? You play as Melanoi, in Greek mythology a chthonic nymph/goddess associated with Persephone, and in the game Zagreus' younger sister. However, the Hades household has been abducted by Kronos, Titan of Time, who has set up residence in the underworld, so Mel is now trying to get down to Hades, rather than out of it like the first game, to kill Kronos and free your family. The story here isn't quite as compelling as the first games, as seeking revenge for a family you've never met just isn't going to be as interesting as trying to reunite with a lost parent, but it works, mostly thanks to the fantastic voice acting. There's also still plenty of Greek myth references and obscure facts for mythology nerds. Hecate splitting into 3 forms for her boss fight made me grin like a doofus. The loop is the same as Hades. You'll either head down into the underworld or up towards Olympus, though that one's not quite finished yet, killing stuff and gathering godly powers for a build. However, there have been some meaningful changes here. First, your ranged magic has been replaced with an area slow, tying to the game's emphasis more on ranged weaponry and crowd control. Second, you can now sprint indefinitely after a dodge, but the biggest change is how the magic meter works. Every attack, special, and spell can now be charged for a Super Omega version, which uses magic and changes based on the weapon. This means you start with essentially 6 unique moves compared to the original game's 3, and all of them can be augmented by godly powers. The magic meter also ties into builds, as some gods like Zeus will reduce your maximum to buff offensive abilities, leading to more meaningful decision making. There's both old and new gods here, with tweaks to all of their abilities, as well as new skills that reward picking abilities of the same element across the pantheon. This, combined with the new combat, drastically enriches the decision making for each run. Zones themselves are much more varied in their appearance, and as mentioned, there's 2 paths to run now, with 3 planned for the final game, meaning 12 areas in total. The progression system has also been tweaked, which involves you bringing certain tools into the world to either mine for rocks, dig, or grow seeds, and so on. The new tarot system for upgrades also makes you make some hard choices, as you can no longer just have every upgrade, and instead need to aim for combos. And there's more to it, but that's really Hades 2, a game packed with content despite not having an ending, and while it has changes from the first game, it definitely still keeps that feel. So what did I like about Hades 2 in early access? Well, the improvements to upgrades, while appearing minor on the surface, do a fantastic job of incorporating hard decision making into build crafting. It lets you get obscenely overpowered if you commit, but there's usually a drawback involved. Additionally, the combat feels way better. I jumped between this and Hades 1 while playing and was shocked how much more fluid the combat in 2 feels, which is great because I think this one's also harder than the first game. And lastly, man, I still love this game's interpretation of Greek gods and the gorgeous art across the board. Hestia, the eldest god of the hearth, is a fiery murder grandma, Kronos is a dapper mafia time lord, and Hera and Zeus's duos are so on flavor that it hurts. When it comes to the bad, much like Hades 1 in early access, the balance around powers is completely borked. Hestia's fire feels much weaker than it should, and honestly, across the board, almost all boons feel a little underpowered. Additionally, I found the writing for the gods overall to be less interesting than before. Now, this is probably because they're at war, so they don't reminisce about mythology nerd stuff, but them being more serious rather than playful makes their encounters less memorable. And lastly, the new progression system just has so much crap you have to get across each run, it feels excessive. Thankfully, they've did some patches to help alleviate that, but man, it just feels like an endless grind. As you know, I rate games here on a 3-point scale, must play, maybe consider, and don't bother, and Hades 2 is already an obscenely polished, addicting experience that adds tons of meaningful improvements over the first game, with its combat, zones, and progression systems. Not to mention, it has a boatload of content. While its story hasn't yet grabbed me like the first game, I imagine in the full version this will improve, and since progression will carry over to that full game, if you're even remotely interested in diving back into Hades, I cannot recommend Hades 2 Early Access enough. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Have you played the Hades 2 Early Access? Are you addicted to it like I am? Please let me know what you think in the comments, and then go out there and give it a look.